Welcome to Beyond Vows Veils, your luxury wedding experience. Our podcast, I feel, is a treasure trove of inspiration and insight for newly engaged couples. Join us as we have captivating stories, expert insight, and real wedding experiences that you can listen and learn from. Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond Vows and Veils. Thank you again for joining me each week to listen, learn, and discover more ways that you can make more informed decisions on your wedding planning journey. So today we're here and we're listening to an episode that's going to be all about bridal beauty. Okay, so we're not just talking about hair and makeup trends. We're diving into real and authentic conversation about behind the scenes wedding morning glam. So the schedules, the energy, the experience, everything that goes into making a bride feel her absolute best for her big day. And yes, even at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so who to better guide us through this conversation than Tiffany Williams? She is the visionary behind Bronze and Glow Beauty and someone I have personally worked many, many years with. So Tiffany's more than just a hair and makeup artist. She's literally a wedding morning magician. She transforms everything from bridal beauty to an experience that's polished and modern and timeless. So she's got over 15 years of experience in this industry, 600 plus brides under her belt. She literally knows exactly what she's talking about, people. So this conversation is a gift for you. You are welcome. But here's the part that really sets Tiffany apart, which I actually didn't realize this about her until we literally started getting into it, that she actually has like years of wedding planning and event planning experience under her belt before she fully stepped into her calling. So this unique kind of perspective gives her a little bit more of an understanding on flow of wedding day, unlike anybody else that I've ever worked with. So she's really spilling her insider secrets on today's episode about why hair and makeup timing is one of the biggest dilemmas for brides, how to balance getting all the photos that you want without feeling overwhelmed, what truly sets you apart for selecting a hair and makeup artist for your actual event day that has really great skill and has really good vibes, and just the pros and cons of maybe even the consideration of splitting up your timeline and ceremony and reception on different days. And then just in general, how to navigate large parties and complex beauty requests from families. So if you're a bride working on how to create the ultimate wedding morning experience, or even just a beauty lover who wants to hear how this industry pro works her magic, this episode really is for you. So let's get into it. Tiffany, tell all of us how you got into this industry, how you joined all us crazy people doing weddings. What happened? Why did you want to do this?
You know what? It's a crazy story how I ended up in bridal hair and makeup. I always say that, all of this happened kind of by divine design because this was not the end goal.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm glad I made it here. Ultimately, I had another plan starting out my career. I did the whole 4-year college thing, migrated here from Belize, went to USF in Tampa, studied sciences, got into that field and realized that that was not my jam. I couldn't see myself doing that long term. So funny enough, I had a part-time job with a wedding planner on the weekends, and fell in love with weddings. Weddings just were a completely, different experience from, back home. Grew up in an old third world country, seeing American weddings. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to do this forever. So I dived into wedding planning and I did that for about 5 years. Got certified, did the whole nine. And then a friend of mine, invited me to join her company because she was starting up or just trying to grow her team in hair and makeup. And from there, I worked, mostly in the administrative part of it, knowing how to communicate with brides and, just coordinating all the little details of a hair and makeup schedule. That was my forte. So from there, I actually had to go out to a wedding because we were short-staffed and realized that I was naturally talented. And from there, I just started to grow my skill. And I like to say I went to YouTube University and learned everything I could. And the rest is history. I'm almost 14 years in now. And, this is my life.
So I love that you actually have wedding planning experience, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually know if any other hair and makeup artist out there that does, because
Yeah,
you have firsthand knowledge of literally
absolutely.
why we are gathered here today on this podcast to talk about
Mm-hmm.
the reality of just in general hair and makeup schedules, setting couples, brides up for success. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think having that background of wedding planning supported you in this like next transition of where you're at today with doing hair and makeup and being like that first touch point with brides for their weekend?
Mm-hmm. I think it really gives me a unique perspective into creating that seamless, flow of services for wedding day because I have the background knowledge of how all the little intricacies of, all the things that come into the wedding flow happen. It gives me that insight to create a schedule that's going to be realistic and that's going to work well with all the other moving parts of the wedding.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. What
Mm-hmm.
would you say? I just want to like dive in because one of the
Yeah.
things that have been coming up as we're in this new season of planning and always comes up. It's so funny. I feel like it's a rite of passage in our office for someone to have to
Mm-hmm.
develop a hair and makeup schedule. It's like
Yes.
you didn't graduate wedding planning unless you actually developed a successful hair and makeup schedule. What are some like misconceptions that you see in the
Mm-hmm.
industry or when you're working with a couple when you're trying to kind of create a realistic schedule?
A lot of the times I think that brides have, it's the first time they're planning a wedding. They have no clue, how all things work, and they have unrealistic expectations of how timelines actually work. They think, oh, I can do my hair and makeup in 30 minutes or maybe an hour if I'm going out to a special event. So that's what it's going to take on wedding day. But, contrary to that belief, there's a lot that goes into getting ready for your wedding day. Typically, we create a schedule that budgets at least about 2 to 3 hours for that getting ready process. Placing your jewelry, structuring your hair that it holds up the weight of your dupatta. So there's so many little things that go into it. And I think brides just don't really have the concept that, hey, this is going to take me an extended amount of time to get ready, so they go in with that unrealistic expectation that it can be done really quickly, and oh, I think I really just want a really natural look, so that shouldn't take as long, when in reality, sometimes that does take longer to create that quote unquote natural look.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
completely agree. And I think that it's hard because please know for any bride that's listening out there, this is not a bash on you. This is not me and
Mm-hmm.
Tiffany getting together to be like, you're unrealistic. And so we wanted to create this whole podcast to tell you. But at the end
Never.
of the day, it is your first time going through this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's usually most everyone's first time going through this whole journey
Absolutely.
and this whole experience. And so that's why I wanted to bring on someone like Tiffany who can really speak to like real life experience. She does this
Mm-hmm.
weekend out. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
13 plus years in the industry. She definitely
Yeah.
has some, forthright to kind of just share with you what to expect. Tiffany, outside of just bride,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the bigger parties, right? And this is
Mm-hmm.
like I always tell my brides, like, please just stop doing this to yourself. We
Yeah.
literally just had a wedding this past weekend that again, we had this huge hair and makeup schedule for all the
Mm-hmm.
aunties and the cousins and
Mm-hmm.
blowouts and the makeup. And it was starting
Yeah.
at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So everyone's ready for like an 8 a.m. barat or something crazy like that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel is your take on large parties? Pros and cons. What's realistic here?
Yeah. Culturally, when it comes to Indian weddings, there are larger families, everybody wants to be involved, everybody wants to look beautiful for the event. But I do usually encourage brides to prioritize the immediate family, prioritize just mom, sister, really kind of focus in on the experience that you want to have on your wedding morning, as opposed to being consumed with having this huge party to get ready. Whether that's, funny enough, I've seen, which I'm sure you've seen too, the trend that a lot of people are not doing bridesmaids nowadays, or if they're doing bridesmaids, they're not necessarily getting hair and makeup done for their bridesmaids. So yeah, I really encourage, brides to focus in on just those core family members who will not take 10 artists for you to be done by, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, because it does add a lot of stress to your wedding day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first off, I have to piggyback off that comment because I am
Mm-hmm.
pro, like, please end the wedding parties. Like, let them just die. Like,
Yes.
let's not do that trend anymore because I think
No.
it's great. I love it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can still have a wedding party, but those
Mm-hmm.
traditional roles of a bridesmaid is more of a
Mm-hmm.
westernized thing. And
Yeah,
quite
absolutely.
frankly, like, it's just like it's your girlfriends, right? Like take a picture
Mm-hmm.
with them, maybe assign them a
Mm-hmm.
select task, but like trying to
Yeah.
have your girls get up with you at 3 o'clock in the morning so they can be in photos with you at 6, and then you also want them to
Everybody's
party with you.
miserable. Yeah.
Everyone's miserable. I can promise
Mm-hmm.
you everybody's miserable because Tiffany and I are the first ones that see them in the room. For
Yes.
like they partied too hard the night before. Now they're up. Now they have like a 17-hour
Mm-hmm.
marathon with you. So it's a lot. I mean, not to hate on wedding party, but I'm all about
Mm-hmm.
that trend actually
No, I
fading
mean,
out.
I agree. I think, a lot of the times it's like you want to include all your family members. You want to include all your friends,
Right.
do the things outside of wedding day with them that's gonna, make them
Right.
feel special and included. But when it comes to, ceremony morning, especially, it's like you really have to just kind of hone in on, okay, who's gonna make my morning just like calm, relaxed.
Yeah.
If you want a fun turn up in the morning, that's a different story. Have your
Yeah.
girlfriends in the room, play your music, do all the things. But, with such a tight timeline, you really have to just kind of prioritize the things that are important. And that sometimes comes down to just like smaller parties.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I don't want to get on a timeline with tangent because I know
Mm-hmm.
that I will go there and I'll start Excel spreadsheeting with everyone on this podcast. But speaking of vibes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that whenever I work with you, you like to create
Mm-hmm.
a very calm and kind of
Yes.
serene environment as much as
Yes.
possible within your control.
That I
You
do.
know, what do you feel? Talk to me about this, how important it is to kind of have that initial set tone for
Mm-hmm.
brides going into their wedding day. Like it's all about the vibes, I feel like in the
Yeah.
morning. How important, how critical is that to you and to your team when you're working with someone?
I think that really sets the tone for the day in general.
Mhm.
Creating that space where you can feel relaxed, you can feel at peace. Indian weddings are a marathon.
Yeah.
A lot of moving parts to it. There are a lot of events. And, when it comes to ceremony morning, you want to just kind of take in the
Yeah.
experience and not miss everything because you're so kind of focused in on just checking off the boxes. So really creating that, Zen environment for me. And that I honestly think it has a little bit more to do with my personality. I'm naturally more introverted, so I like just calm. I like peace. I don't love, a lot of people. I don't have a lot of, friends around me all the time that, I'm just chatting with. So I think when it comes to working with my brides in the morning, a lot of people comment on the fact that, I do kind of bring that calm to the room. And, I think that's just a little bit, personality based too, that I do have that just kind of nurturing nature, I guess. And I think that lends to just an easy flow of the morning, that they're not overwhelmed with, all the things that are being thrown at them. But I think creating that in your space, whether that's bringing elements in that are going to make you feel more relaxed, burn a candle, have soft music playing, just really diving into, creating a space for calm relaxation, because you're going to be bombarded with all the people that are there to see you, and you're going to get overwhelmed throughout the day. So whether it's like carving out that little bit of time that we have, just your artist and you chatting, your mom there, your sister, or your favorite cousin there, I think really creating that space is important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it just goes back to like brides, whatever your typical morning routine is. I
Mm-hmm.
think having any sense of routine that morning is sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you're starting that routine.
Yeah.
But I think that that kind of brings some sense of grounding to that
Mm-hmm.
practice for you to
Yeah.
go in. So I completely agree. Before everyone comes in your room and is like popping bottles of champagne, they're like, let's go,
Mm-hmm.
let's do
Yes,
this, like you want to do
exactly.
that. But it's like, it's also
Exactly.
as you mentioned, it's a 17-hour day
Mm-hmm.
minimum and
Yeah.
back to back photos,
Mm-hmm.
back in hair and makeup, the whole thing. And so
Yeah.
I think having that environment's really important.
Yeah, and not to mention, I mean, you're exhausted from your all your pre-ceremony events. So it's like,
Yeah.
really just kind of focus in on that little alone time.
Obviously, Tiffany, not everyone gets the amazing experience of working with you.
Oh,
So, what would
stop.
you say to brides who are,
Mm-hmm.
they're in the beginning stages, they're trying to find that
Mm-hmm.
vendor, right? They want someone that has that same synergy. Like,
Yeah.
how can brides communicate that priority to maybe
Mm-hmm.
someone that they're vetting before they
Yeah.
like, because, sometimes it's like too late. I've worked with
Absolutely.
those, not to hate on anyone, I will never name names, but I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with that hair and makeup artist that like shows up late, number one, is like
Mm-hmm.
complaining about how parking was so hard. And
Yeah.
like, it just kind of starts that like ick
Mm-hmm.
energy going into it. Like,
Absolutely.
how do you avoid that? Like, can you avoid that?
Honestly, I think, vetting your hair and makeup team from the very beginning and kind of outlining the things that are important to you
Mhm.
are really paramount to having a successful, experience.
Yeah.
When you're looking for a hair and makeup team, there's so many options out there, which is great because everybody's a little different. People have different tastes. But
Right.
you want to look for a team that one reflects your style and your energy. Look at their
Yeah.
Instagram pages, look at their
Yeah.
portfolios, see if you can see yourself reflected in their work. First of
Right.
all, that's important. And then when it comes to aligning with their personality, read
Mhm.
reviews, see what other brides are saying about
Right.
your artist.
Right.
See what other client experiences have been, and see if that aligns with what you're looking for too. So I think that's
Mhm.
super important, when you start planning, just to kind of create a really clear idea
Yeah.
of what it is that you do want in the beginning, so that those are the key points that you're looking for going into it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's just going back to being intentional. I feel like you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of dating your vendors, right? In the
Yeah,
beginning, you're
absolutely.
doing
Yeah.
consults, you're doing a little
Uh-huh.
meet and greet, you're seeing who you have chemistry with,
Exactly.
who
Mm-hmm.
you're excited about. And it really is. It's kind of just a very personal decision as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that. And I think that being able to even like chat with them initially, you're going to kind
Yes.
of get a sense like, not hating on anyone that's a diva, but you can be a diva and
Mm-hmm.
also like drop your diva status to like show up for brides.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Yeah.
just
And another key point of that too is like, yeah, do that initial consultation. Like you said, jump on a call with them just to kind of see, write down the important questions that are in your head of like, okay, how do you work in this kind of situation? And, kind of outline, like I said, the priorities that are important to you, and ask those questions up front, and then schedule a trial run so that you can meet them
yeah,
in person
yeah,
and actually see their energy in person, see if they vibe with you, see if,
yeah.
their work is aligned with what you're going for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's just kind of
Yeah.
being intentional with your hire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I was going to ask you, obviously, I know that you don't just do South Asian weddings. That's obviously kind of
Mm-hmm.
the topic of what we're chatting
Yeah.
about now. But, being someone that's done so many of them, do you think it's important that brides are hiring someone that has that background and that knowledge as opposed to bringing in a hair and makeup team that maybe hasn't done a South Asian wedding before? I mean, what is your take on that?
That's a great question, because I think having that knowledge of how South Asian weddings work, knowing just the vernacular of like what's being said in the room, the
Right.
references that they're making when it comes to the outfits and the jewelry, that's helpful in just the
Mhm.
journey of your styling.
Right.
If you have an artist that predominantly does just Western weddings, it may be a little harder to just communicate all the things because they don't necessarily understand all the elements that go into styling.
Right.
They may not know how to properly place your tika so that it
Right.
stays on for
Yeah.
the duration of your ceremony. So I do think, that's definitely a decision that I think brides should, consider when selecting an artist. On the flip side, I think hiring an artist who maybe doesn't have a lot of experience in, South Asian weddings
Yeah.
does give you a little bit more flexibility in your look as well. You know,
Sure.
if you're not going for a very traditional look, and I think that's why a lot of, you know,
Mhm.
brides hire me, because I do have that perspective of, I do a lot of Western weddings, I do a lot of South Asian weddings. So
Right.
I have that versatility in that
Mhm.
I can create a non-traditional, softer, more romantic look that's not maybe aligned with, you know, those traditional Indian hair and makeup styles.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
you know, I think it is, you know, a kind of a toss up of, okay, yeah, it can be a pro that you look for an artist who may not be familiar, but then you get that option of different styling that isn't leaning more traditional, but then having someone who has that knowledge does make the communication a little bit easier.
Right. I think, yeah, I definitely agree with you. I actually love that you do have that versatility. It's so funny because I don't really
Mm-hmm.
work on any white dress weddings with you. So I always like think it's
Mm-hmm.
so funny when I hear, oh yeah, duh, you do like so many styled shoots, you do all sorts, you have
Yeah,
like a really wide portfolio.
I do.
And I
I
think that
do.
that's brilliant. Because you're right, there's definitely going to be brides that want a little bit more of a modern look. They don't want something, but they
Mm-hmm.
also need someone that has that skill and background that they know how to put on and do
Absolutely.
they know how to like kind of support you with getting your outfit done appropriately and all
Yes.
those sort of things.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And I think that also, just back to the big groups, also, if you're going to hire a hair and makeup team, I would say
Mm-hmm.
outside of just yourself, like it's
Mm-hmm.
more than just timeline. It's also just in general understanding culturally that if your family tends to run late, they're not
Mm-hmm.
going to wake up that morning and their whole personality has changed, where they're going to now be like on time. Like that auntie's that's
Not
always
gonna
half an hour
happen.
late. She's not showing up on time, even if she said she was going to be there, you know? And so it's not necessarily anybody's fault or finger point.
Mm-hmm.
It's purely just to say that if you're going to make the investment of hiring a small army to also get all these
Mm-hmm.
ladies ready, just know that that investment may be lost because
Mm-hmm.
once someone's late, it just goes back down into the
Oh yeah.
chain. And
It
so
is a trickle down effect. Mm-hmm.
right. And so that first person that was scheduled at 3 a.m. that decided to show up
Mm-hmm.
at 5, well, someone's
Yeah.
in that 5 o'clock slot and they actually were
Mm-hmm.
supposed to go at 4. And so then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, do. And then before you know it, like you want to accommodate them, but it's like the barat's going on. And so it's like, now we
Yeah.
gotta, what do we do
Yeah.
now? You
Yeah, no,
know?
absolutely. That it's a domino effect. And, you know, unfortunately, we've seen that happen before. And,
Right.
you know, at the end of the day, you can do all the planning that you want to prepare for that. Just like you said, that auntie that's always late is not going to show up on time. So, you
Right.
know, brides ask us all the time, like, hey, do you actually assign names to the schedule for us? And that's not something that we do because we
Sure.
don't know the dynamic of your
Right.
friends and family. So
Right.
we always encourage you, okay, you know that your cousin is going to show up at 3 o'clock when you tell her to. Make sure that you put the people in the schedule that you're familiar with that
Right.
know that they're going to be on
Right.
time.
Right.
So that, you know, it sets us up for success ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that friend that's type A that's going to be there on time, like put
Mm-hmm.
her in the 3 a.m. spot. Don't
Exactly.
put the one
Exactly.
person that's not reliable in the very early
Yeah.
stages because then it trickles down into the whole day. And
100%.
we see it all the time. But if
We
people
do.
want to keep spending money and setting up this hair and makeup room, go for it. It's fine.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a different trend, which is something that I
Mm-hmm.
think that I've been resonating with a lot. I've been seeing a
Mm-hmm.
lot lately is couples that are splitting up their ceremony and reception onto 2 different days. Are you
Yes.
seeing this on your end?
I am, and I
Yeah.
kind of love it. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
You
Of
know, I know people have mixed feelings and there are pros and cons to it, but
course.
I feel like at the end of the day, splitting ceremony and reception on different days, it just creates a different dynamic. You know,
Mhm.
the bride is more
Right.
relaxed, she is more rested, you know,
Right.
it's a more enjoyable experience. I know on the flip side of that, you know, there can be additional costs incurred, you know, scheduling conflicts, things like that. So there are other factors that you always have to consider when you're thinking of doing different day events. However, I've seen a lot more positive from it than I see, you know, the drawbacks of it. But yeah, I love the trend. I'm all about it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it goes without saying that if you're a bride and you're curious and open-minded about it, I think
Mm-hmm.
the additional cost that Tiffany's probably referencing is, you're probably going to have to get some additional accommodations for your vendors.
Mm-hmm.
You charge a fee for gap days or in between
Yeah.
days, having to stay on another day.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously your production vendors may have to stay on another day. So there's definitely added
Mm-hmm.
costs. But I think in general, like it's like what kind of experience do you want to have that weekend? And if
Absolutely.
you're the type of bride that you're like, I'm not a morning person, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well,
Yeah.
I don't know that I could change you to be a morning
Yeah.
person, and I think it's just being honest with your personality and what you feel comfortable with
Mm-hmm.
and what's going to resonate with you because it's going to show up on your face in photo, video. It's just all
Absolutely.
the things.
Yeah. And I think it really appeals to the bride who really is just prioritizing the experience.
Right.
This is once in a lifetime event. We hope that, you're going to have all, your favorite people all in one space celebrating with you. You want to be able to really fully enjoy that experience and not be just like I said earlier, just checking off the boxes, just like going with the motions of, okay, I need to be here. I need to be here. This is photo time. And you really sit back and realize after the wedding that you kind of blacked out through the whole thing and didn't really enjoy the experience,
Right.
which I hear a lot,
Right.
how many,
Blackout's a total thing. It's like
yeah,
you were just going through the motions, like one
yeah,
thing after the other. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I've heard how many brides heads have I had to hold up by reception because they're
Oh
falling
yeah.
asleep.
Oh, I
It
know.
it
I
happens
know.
all the time. Like I said, you have 2, 3 events even before wedding day sometimes that you are physically exhausted, you're emotionally exhausted. If you have your ceremony on one day and your reception on one day, you get to rest in between, you get to like try to
You're
recover,
your best self.
you get to enjoy your family and friends and
Yeah.
just really be in the moment as opposed to going through the motions.
Yeah, it really is
Mm-hmm.
one of those things where, you have to really ask yourself again, like honestly, like what's
Mm-hmm.
your personality, what's your
Yeah.
vibe? Because
Yeah.
I'm with you. It's so funny that, yeah, it totally is like a blackout. You're just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I've been up
Yeah.
since 3 o'clock in the morning. I just got done with 40 group photos. It's
Yeah.
now
You're a
noon.
zombie.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was also just back to, again, don't want to harp too much on schedule and
Mm-hmm.
timeline, but it's
Yeah.
we're here for you guys. We're literally
Yeah.
sharing this wealth and knowledge for all of our brides out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that one of the challenges that I know that planners and hair and makeup artists run into a
Mm-hmm.
lot
Yeah.
is not necessarily like we get through it. We know we have to start early in the
Mm-hmm.
morning. It's like, okay, it is what
Mm-hmm.
it is.
Yeah.
It's always the reception look for me
Yeah.
because it's like traditional is like I don't know, a 9 a.m. barat, 10 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
ceremony,
Mm-hmm.
over by 11:30, taking
Yeah.
photos for an hour. At this point, you haven't eaten or probably gone to the restroom. And so
Oh
now you have
yeah.
to go back to your room, get undressed and changed, and then
And
pretty much
start
you're
right
right
away.
back
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And then it's also like putting pressure, I feel like, on the hair and makeup artist because you have already communicated with this bride a certain look. You know
Correct.
how long that look's going to take. And then now
Mm-hmm.
it's like, we need her ready at X time.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Like, is that something that gets hashed out early? Obviously, I've dealt with you before where I'm like
Mm-hmm.
delivering the bride and I'm like, we're later than
Like we're
thought.
exactly, and that's something that, like you said, unfortunately, we have dealt with it before, and
Right.
it's not the most ideal situation, but we've got to, roll with the punches. At the end of the
Right.
day, it's like some things may run over. Photos may take a little longer than anticipated.
Right.
Things
Right.
happen throughout the day, and we
Right.
have to just make adjustments to that. When it comes to the reception look, we do create that that expectation of like, okay, this is going to take me 2 hours at minimum because
Mhm.
you want glam waves. Glam waves cannot be done in 20 minutes.
Right.
That's the reality of the situation. You want to
Right.
set your artist up for success as well. No artist will work their best under pressure.
Right.
You want to create a realistic timeline that, okay, this is the time frame I have. If I need to cut that back by, 20, 30 minutes, that can be doable. Have
Sure.
another artist jump in and help out where
Right.
necessary.
Right.
But really setting the tone for the day and having,
Right.
that time carved out is always ideal.
Yeah.
If it's not at all possible, there are, changes that we can make. Like I said, I've had situations where
Mm-hmm.
photos did run over and the
Yeah.
bride was delivered back to me with, 30 minutes to get ready. And
Right.
it's not an ideal situation,
Right.
but you've got to just, make it
Right.
happen.
Right.
So, we handled it at that point, brought another artist in where we're really working together to just
Right.
get her undressed and,
Right. Right.
combing her hair out and
Right.
adjusting to what needs to be, accomplished within the time frame. But
Right.
at the end of the day, it is a stressful situation for everybody. And,
Yeah.
and that's why, I encourage the 2 days because, things like that
Right.
do happen and we can plan for it, but
Yeah.
ultimately things happen sometimes that are beyond our control.
Yeah. I mean, you're totally right, Tiffany. And it's also just,
Mhm.
I look back at all these conversations that I know we harp and we drill on, and people think
Mhm.
we're being bossy almost to the
Yeah.
point where I'm like, listen, I've been here a million times,
Yeah.
and like it's not gonna flow the way you think. We're not gonna quick get through these
Mhm.
photos, because at the end of the day, I think the one thing that you and I have also talked about is just like
Mhm.
the plethora of photo expectations that need to
Yes.
happen within those 2 day periods of time. So again, I would never dictate for a bride what's important to you in terms of coverage for your event,
Mhm.
but to give some context, ask yourself, do I need to have a solo portrait with every
Yeah.
single one of my bridesmaids
Yeah.
at the ceremony if I'm already
Exactly.
up at 3 o'clock in the morning? Do I have to do these group photos with my entire wedding party, or can I just get one
Mhm.
shot at the month up? Like, you have to really think, because assembling people, organizing the
Mhm.
photo, making sure that the hair and makeup is done, like all these things take time, and then it
Mhm.
just trickles into your day of what can
Yeah.
actually be conducive. I know I do it because I do it every week, where it's like
Yeah.
timeline's good, right? We're going through the formalities, we're
Yeah.
shaping things up, and then we get to hair and makeup, and it's like everyone hates it. They're like,
Yes.
oh my God, why is this so
Yep.
challenging? But it's like, because you're a human being, you're
Mhm.
not a robot. you
Exactly.
you do need to sleep and rest and eat and all the
Mhm.
things. And so I have these brides who are like, nope, we're just going to do it this way. We're going to go quick. We're going to go quick. The famous last words, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. I'm like, and it's just like,
That
okay,
is so accurate. Yeah.
it's like, do you want me to say,
Yeah.
do you want me to say, okay, yeah, no problem?
Mhm.
Or am I doing you a disservice? And I think it's the
Absolutely.
same thing for you when you're getting a bride back in the chair late. It's like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
going to make it work. It may
Yeah.
not be exactly this because of the limited
Exactly.
time, but like I'm going to do everything I can to like make sure that you're happy with this. And so it's like there's only so many hours in a day. And I
Correct.
think that sometimes can be a challenge, I know. And so having a really amazing hair and makeup artist like yourself, and having a planner that can support the client and making realistic timeline decisions, I think is
Yes.
vital, because you'd rather us be vocal now than on the day of the wedding be like, well, you said it was
Absolutely.
only going to take 10 minutes. It's like, that's not an acceptable
Absolutely.
answer, you know?
Yeah, no, and just to give you your flowers, you and your team do an amazing job at that. I've worked with planners, just like you said, will never be named, but you
Sure.
know, when it comes to orchestrating that timeline, you have to create the expectation with the
Right.
client and with, the vendor,
Right.
or just kind of paint that picture for them that, hey, this
Yeah.
is how things are really going to flow and
Yeah.
actually execute on that.
Yeah.
If it means, hey, you cannot get these photos, because
Hmm.
it's not going to align with the rest of the day, you know, pull them out of photos. If this is more important to you, if you've expressed to me that joining your cocktail hour is more important to you
Right.
than, taking photos with these extended family that you don't even really know because your
Right.
parents are requesting them,
Right.
sometimes you have to kind of make the trade-off. So,
Yeah.
you guys really do an excellent job at, okay, this is what's going to happen and this is
Right.
what you've hired me for. So
Right.
this
Right.
is how the timeline is gonna go.
Right. Right.
So yeah, we really appreciate that because, I've been in rooms sometimes waiting
Yeah.
for an hour and a half for the bride to return, when she was
Right.
supposed to be back by a certain time,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
and the planner is essentially the one who needs to step in to,
Right.
I personally can't go pull the bride out of photos, because
Right.
that's not,
Right.
that's overstepping my boundaries there.
Right.
But, at the end of the day,
Right.
they've outlined what they deem important to you. So that
Right.
is your job to, really orchestrate that. And I think you guys do an
Yeah.
amazing job at that.
Well, Tiffany, I appreciate you. I mean, you know what? It's like at the end of the day, I have like the choices meeting, like the come to Jesus, the choices meeting
Yeah.
where I say, okay, so photos went well. We are about 15 minutes off schedule. Here's
Yeah.
what we have a choice for. We
Absolutely.
can go as planned. You're going to be X late. This is going to bleed into our later photos, or we can do this. But it's like a quick little regroup. Here's where we're at. Here's our choices. Because at the end of the day, you just going with the motions and saying everything's just going to happen as according to what we thought. It's like, you're
not
living
realistic.
in La La Land.
In
and so,
absolutely. Yeah.
the timeline's a reference, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's a guide. And, we want to follow it to the T. But I love my clients that, the picture, by the way, brides, we're harping on hair and makeup schedules, but the only thing that dictates your hair and makeup schedule is your photos. So if you can address your expectation with how many pictures that you want to take, if it's a first look with dad, first look with mom, first look with groom, now you want a first look with wedding party, then you want individual shots with those girls, now you want bridal portraits, like what is the expectation for the amount of photos that we're taking? It will directly correlate to when your hair and makeup is starting, right?
Yes,
and ending.
no, that's so
and
accurate.
all those good things. So Tiffany, any like parting words of advice or anything that you feel like we didn't cover, or just anything like you don't know for clients to take into consideration on their hair and makeup journeys, their beauty journeys?
I think just kind of circling back to where we first started, just having like the having realistic expectations of your team and really creating a guideline for what you do want and the things that you do prioritize, making those known and making those important, communicating clearly with your artist. We, at the end of the day, want a successful event as much as you do. So we do all the things in our power of, creating a timeline, creating a buffer in there that, okay, should you oversleep, we still have a little 20-minute extra buffer at the end that, okay, we can kind of catch up on time if needed. But just really, I think clear communication is key in regards to, a successful client vendor relationship when it comes to hair and makeup. And, just like you said, what you don't know, you don't know. A client recently, asked me, okay, well, can I start at 6 a.m.? My people don't want to wake up early, but we need to be ready by 8:30, and it's my job to say, well, that's not realistic. We cannot get 20 people done because that's the number of people that you have.
Wow, 20.
Wow. We can't get that done within that time frame because it's not gonna work. Ultimately, I mean, if we had no choice, you can bring in as many artists as you need to. But it's not a realistic situation, and just clearly communicating that to clients, I think is the best solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tiffany, just to piggyback off of that and to give brides some context. So again, if you've got a large group party like that and you want everyone ready in a 2-hour period of time, let's say that hair takes, I don't know, let's say it takes 30 to 45 minutes per service.
Correct,
for hair and then for makeup. That's if you don't come with wet hair, by the way. People walking into the hair and makeup room with wet hair, I'm like, you are in trouble.
People sometimes don't read the instructions that we send them.
They don't.
But that's okay. It's a part of it, and like you said, we just got to roll with it.
It's all part of the journey. But, essentially what I was going to say is, when you have that many people, understand that if you're getting married, let's say it's even like peak wedding time, right?
Yes.
You can't just expect to have 15 to 20 different artists there, each delivering like 1 or 2 services each.
Correct.
Because understand that there's so many other events out there and there's so many other weddings taking place, and there is like a minimum amount of services that artists
Yeah,
also need to be making in order for it
correct.
to be worth their time, right? To show
Yeah.
up at 3 o'clock in the
No,
morning and do all these
exactly.
services.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because that's something that, we have to explain to clients as well. We,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, for it to be worth it for an artist
Sure.
to come out of their house at 2, 3 in the morning, leave
Right.
their family, leave the comfort of their bed, they have to be compensated for a certain number
Right.
of services. And that's why we structure our timelines the way that we do as well.
Right.
Ideally a standard timeline will run about 4 hours for wedding morning.
Right.
That's what we try to kind of stay within that time
Mhm.
frame. If it has to be shorter than that, then certain
Right.
concessions need to be made for that too.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's just, about educating the client in, what needs to be done based on the time frame that we're
Right.
given.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And obviously there's every vendor and at every different stage in their career,
Mm-hmm.
what they're willing to work with you on.
Yeah.
But just keeping that in mind, obviously, when you are hiring your hair and makeup team, the
Mm-hmm.
expectation level to be, met with the reality of when you're getting married and how many people
Mm-hmm.
are needed and what is what is the time frame that you're open to. But
Mm-hmm.
Tiffany, it has been such a pleasure. Please tell all of our couples where they can find
Yes.
you.
Well, they can find me on my website at bronzeglowbeauty.com. They can find me on Instagram with the same name, Bronze Glow Beauty. And those are two of the platforms that you can see a lot more of my work. Unfortunately, I'm not on TikTok because I'm not that cool. But
Neither am I. Mercedes does all that.
Eventually we'll get there, but yeah,
Yes.
Instagram and just our website, and they can always, email us at hello@bronzeglowbeauty.com, send us an inquiry. Yeah. But
Amazing.
uh
And can people DM you if they have any questions from the episode or just in general?
yeah,
I mean, love to pick your brain.
yeah. People
Cool.
people can
Cool.
definitely DM me, DM me with questions. I have been in the industry for, so long, probably, almost as long as you have.
Yeah.
And I love to share the knowledge that I have, if it's going to
Yeah.
be helpful, even if it's, something that I can answer, something, a question that I can answer,
Yeah.
even if you're not, hiring us for your team. I love to share knowledge and help with,
Yeah.
any subject matter that I'm knowledgeable about.
Absolutely. I love it, Tiffany. And I always appreciate, I'm sure when I've sent you some emails like, hey,
Hmm.
can the bride be ready at this time? Like we all take out our like Paleo Santos and sage. We're just like,
Let
okay.
me get into my Zen mode before.
So, as always, such a pleasure to connect with you. I appreciate your time and your energy here today. Thank you for sharing your wealth of
The
knowledge.
pleasure is all mine. This was really fun, and I'm sure it's going to help someone, and I hope it does.
Awesome.